There are places in the world where time stands still, where dust settles on secrets the earth has tried to bury. And in one such place, near the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, in what is now modern-day Iraq, a man unearthed something that would quietly become one of the most debated, most mysterious relics of the ancient world. A small clay pot, about the size of a soda can. Uneventful in appearance, harmless really. And yet this simple object was not so simple at all. Inside the pot was a copper tube, and within that, an iron rod. It didn't belong in a kitchen or in a shrine. It wasn't ornamental. It was mechanical. And when modern scientists examined it, they were stunned. This wasn't art. This wasn't ritual. This was technology. This was the Baghdad battery, a relic thousands of years old that, when filled with acidic liquid, can generate an electrical charge. But how, why, and who could have possibly understood the very principles of electricity so far back in human history? Let's rewind the clock. We're told that electricity was first harnessed in the 18th century. Benjamin Franklin, lightning, the kite in the storm, the spark of modern science. But what if we were wrong? Because this object, dated to around 250 BCE, suggests a deeper truth. It suggests that long before we wired cities, long before we lit the night with incandescent bulbs, someone had already started the journey. Now let's pause. Take a step back. One artifact could be an anomaly, a mistake, a fluke. But there wasn't just one. Multiple similar devices have been found in the region, each with the same basic structure, each pointing to the same conclusion. The ancients may have known how to create electricity. Not theory, not myth, but practical, usable current. The question is, what did they use it for? Some archaeologists believe the Baghdad battery was used for electroplating, a process where a thin layer of gold or silver is deposited onto a base metal using electrical current. If true, it would rewrite what we know about craftsmanship in the ancient world. It would mean that some of the most beautiful golden artifacts weren't merely sculpted, they were engineered, with precision, with knowledge, with intent. Others propose a more mystical explanation, that the battery was part of a religious experience, a tool used by priests or shamans to shock the faithful, literally. Imagine, you walk into a temple, you kneel before a priest, he places his hand upon your head, and suddenly you feel a jolt. Divine power, or just clever engineering? But here's the most unnerving possibility. What if this battery was just one piece of a larger machine? One cell in a grid we no longer understand, a remnant of something far more advanced, a generator perhaps, or a trigger, or a key. Because if the Baghdad battery existed, what else might have existed beside it? And what might those objects have done? We've never found wires, or light bulbs, or machines. But what if those were made of wood, or cloth, or some other material lost to time? After all, time is a great destroyer. It devours everything, especially evidence. Some skeptics dismiss it all. They say, it's just a jar, you're reading too much into it. And maybe they're right. Maybe it's nothing. But that's the thing about mystery. Nothing becomes something the moment you start asking questions. Because what if the battery wasn't an outlier, but a fragment of a forgotten science? Think about this. In the same region, nearly 5,000 years ago, the ancient Sumerians created one of the earliest known writing systems. They studied the stars, calculated complex lunar calendars, and built cities that rivaled those of much later civilizations. Why not electricity? What if their knowledge extended into realms we've barely rediscovered? Even today, our most brilliant minds marvel at the precision of ancient architecture, the engineering of megaliths, and the cosmic alignment of temples. What if we're missing the key that ties it all together? Electricity, light, energy, things we associate with modernity, but maybe, just maybe, they're not modern at all. Imagine an ancient temple glowing with softly lit halls, powered not by flame but by silent energy, invisible, controlled, understood. A sacred place where technology and spirituality were not in conflict, but but part of the same truth. What would it mean for history? The Baghdad Battery is more than an artifact. It's a challenge, a whisper from the past daring us to open our minds, to see beyond the timeline we've been taught. Because if they had electricity, what else did they have? What else have we buried? And what else is still waiting to be found? Part 2. The Great Pyramid, a Power Plant. We've always looked up at the pyramids in awe. Silent giants rising from the sands of Egypt, carved from millions of limestone blocks, aligned with impossible precision. For centuries, we were told they were tombs, grand monuments to dead pharaohs. That was the story. But something about that story never felt quite right. Because if these pyramids were built for the dead, then why are the walls inside them so strangely empty? Why are there no elaborate murals, no texts, no inscriptions glorifying the kings they supposedly entombed? Why are the passageways so narrow, the chambers so cold, so precise, so mechanical? The Great Pyramid of Giza isn't just the largest pyramid in Egypt. It's the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing. And it's not just a marvel of size, it's a marvel of engineering. The pyramid is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. The deviation? Less than 1/20th of a degree. In fact, its orientation is more accurate than many modern buildings constructed using GPS. But this was built over 4,000 years ago. So how did they do it? And perhaps more importantly, why? When you step inside the Great Pyramid, something feels different. There are no hieroglyphs, no treasures, no confirmed burial remains. What you find instead is a network of chambers, shafts, and tunnels, constructed with such precision, such deliberate design, that some researchers have begun asking a different question entirely. What if this wasn't a tomb at all? What if the Great Pyramid was a machine? Some scientists and alternative researchers propose that the pyramid was actually a kind of power plant, one designed to harness natural energy from the earth and amplify it. Not in the way we think of power today with wires and light bulbs, but through resonance, through frequency, through the very heartbeat of the planet. They point to the materials used: limestone for insulation, granite for conductivity, and the location of the pyramid itself, placed atop a powerful intersection of underground water sources and magnetic lines. They suggest that water may have flowed beneath the pyramid, creating vibrations that were funneled upward through its internal chambers. In other words, energy transmission, not storage, not symbolism, but function. The king's chamber, built from massive blocks of granite, is especially fascinating. That granite contains high amounts of quartz, crystals known to generate piezoelectric energy under pressure. What if these blocks weren't just placed for structure, but for purpose? What if the chamber was meant to vibrate, to hum, to resonate with frequencies we still don't fully understand? There are those who say that the pyramid acted like a giant tuning fork, converting Earth's natural energy into something measurable, usable. But usable for what? Could it have powered devices, opened portals, amplified consciousness? Of course, these are theories, speculation. But here's what we do know. The pyramid is unlike anything else built in the ancient world. It was not simply a larger version of a smaller tomb. It was designed from the ground up with geometry so advanced, it encodes the dimensions of Earth itself, the curvature of the planet, the distance to the sun, the speed of light, hidden in the coordinates. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe we're looking at something built not just with stone, but with knowledge. The type of knowledge that should have been impossible in that era. The type of knowledge that suggests these ancient builders understood math on a level that rivals or even exceeds our own. Mainstream scholars stick to the idea that the Great Pyramid was built by tens of thousands of laborers using copper tools and ropes. No wheels, no pulleys, no advanced machinery, just manpower. But even then, the logistics seem impossible. Moving blocks weighing over 70 tons into place with perfect alignment. constructing internal shafts that rise at precise angles, connecting to star constellations. Even with today's technology, replicating the pyramid would be a monumental challenge. So what are we missing? What if the pyramid wasn't just a monument, but a legacy? A relic left behind by a civilization that understood a different kind of science? Not the kind found in textbooks, but the kind whispered in symbols, encoded in stone, waiting for us to remember? There are whispers of sound technology, of harmonic frequencies, of energy that flows like water, drawn from the earth itself. Some say the pyramid was never meant to be seen as a burial site, but as an engine of transformation, a tool to elevate consciousness, to heal, or to connect with something greater than ourselves. And if that's true, if even a fraction of that is true, then the Great Pyramid is not just a structure from the past. It's a message to the future, a reminder that we may not be the first advanced civilization on this planet. That knowledge comes in cycles, that what was once lost may be remembered. So the next time you stand before it or see it in a picture, don't just see a pile of stones. See a question mark carved in stone. Because the greatest mystery of the Great Pyramid isn't how it was built, it's why. And if the ancients could harness the power of the earth itself, then what else might they have created? The Antikythera mechanism, a computer from the deep. In the blue depths of the Aegean Sea, a storm once forced a group of sponge divers to take shelter along the coast of the small Greek island of Antikythera. The year was 1901. The location was ancient, the sea calm again, and what they found resting beneath the waves would take over 100 years to fully comprehend. Among statues, coins, and shipwrecked pottery was something small, unimpressive at first glance, a lump of corroded bronze encrusted with age. But within that rusted mass was a secret so advanced it shouldn't have existed. It would become known as the Antikythera mechanism, the world's first known analog computer. Let that sink in. A computer from ancient Greece, dating back over 2,000 years. The device was made of dozens of intricate bronze gears, so precisely interlocked that they could predict the movements of the sun, the moon, and even the positions of the planets. Eclipses, lunar cycles, solar events, all calculated with mechanical precision, using gear ratios that would make a modern watchmaker pause in admiration. The level of sophistication in the Antikythera mechanism shocked historians and engineers alike. Nothing close to its complexity would appear again in human history for another 1,500 years. And yet, it existed, in the hands of people who, we thought, only had basic tools and philosophical ideas about the cosmos. So where did it come from, and how did they build it? Some say the device was based on the work of Archimedes. Others point to Hipparchus, the Greek astronomer who pioneered trigonometry. But the truth is, we don't really know. The surviving fragments give us only a glimpse into its workings, not the mind behind it. What's clear is that whoever built it didn't just observe the stars. They understood them deeply. They knew orbital patterns, retrogrades, lunar irregularities. They understood mathematics and engineering on a scale far ahead of their time. So the question becomes, was this a lone invention or part of a larger technological lineage now lost? If a computer like this existed, who was it for? Was it a tool for sailors, for priests, for kings? Or was it something even more mysterious, part of a knowledge system that bridged the heavens and the earth? The Antikythera mechanism challenges everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. It suggests a depth of understanding of astronomy, geometry, metallurgy that textbooks often attribute only to the modern era. And yet here it is, tangible, functional, beautiful in its design. Researchers have spent decades reconstructing its function using X-rays, 3D models, and AI simulations. And still, we don't fully understand how the ancients came to possess such knowledge. Some speculate that the Greeks inherited this wisdom from an even older source, perhaps a forgotten culture that once mapped the stars with similar devices. A lost civilization, wiped from history, leaving behind only whispers. Others think this was a singular genius, whose work was simply too advanced for the world around him. But there's one more detail that's easy to miss, and it might be the most important of all. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't just built, it was portable. It was a compact device, possibly housed in a wooden case with dials, inscriptions, and turning knobs. It could be used, held, operated. This wasn't an abstract tool meant for a temple. It was functional, practical, which means it was probably not the only one. So where are the others? Were they destroyed in wars, burned in libraries, sunk in ships never found? Or are they still out there, buried beneath sand, stone, or sea, waiting to be rediscovered? The Antikythera mechanism forces us to reconsider the linear timeline of human progress. It makes us ask, if we've already lost something this complex, how much else has slipped through our fingers? Maybe history isn't a steady climb. Maybe it's a cycle, one in which knowledge rises, then falls, discovered, then forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, we're not at the peak of human understanding, but only in a phase of remembering. Because if the ancients could build a machine that mapped the cosmos with gears and bronze, then what else did they know? And more importantly, what else did they leave behind? The Ark of the Covenant, sacred relic, or ancient technology? There are artifacts so steeped in legend, so wrapped in fear and reverence, that even today, thousands of years later, their very mention causes chills. The Ark of the Covenant is one of them. Most people know the Ark through religious texts. It's described in the Hebrew Bible as a sacred chest built under the direction of Moses to house the stone tablets inscribed with the Ten Commandments, a symbol of divine power, a mobile sanctuary, a direct line to the presence of God. But beneath the religious symbolism, there are clues that point not just to spiritual power, but to something else entirely, something technological. The descriptions of the Ark aren't vague. They're incredibly detailed. It was made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, inside and out. It had gold rings on its sides, with poles inserted so that no one would ever have to touch it directly. On top sat two golden cherubim facing each other, wings outstretched, forming what was called the mercy seat, the very space from which God's voice was said to emerge. But what happens if you strip away the spiritual language and look at this as a piece of hardware? You get something remarkable, a wooden box lined with conductive material. Gold, a metal known for its resistance to corrosion and excellent electrical conductivity. Poles for transportation, never direct contact, instructions not to touch it under penalty of death, accounts of people being struck dead just for coming near it. Does that sound like a spiritual curse? Or something else? Does it sound like high voltage? There are many who've begun to wonder if the Ark of the Covenant was not just a symbol of power, but a literal device, a generator, a capacitor, a piece of lost technology that somehow channeled, stored, or even emitted electrical energy. This isn't wild speculation pulled from thin air. In ancient Ethiopian traditions, the Ark was said to glow. It emitted light, it produced heat. In some cases, it was said to burn those who mishandled it, not metaphorically, literally. And in the biblical accounts, the Ark didn't just sit quietly. It was carried into battle. It was said to bring down walls, strike enemies, and clear pathways with divine fire. During the siege of Jericho, the Israelites marched with the Ark around the city, and the walls fell. Was that divine intervention, or a device being activated? Some even believe the Ark produced radioactive or electromagnetic energy, possibly used as a weapon, a communication device, or even a power source for other ancient technologies we've long since lost. Now ask yourself, why would ancient people go to such lengths to build this object exactly to spec, carry it through the desert, and guard it with absolute fear for generations, unless it did something real? The Ark was not allowed to be touched, even by the high priests. When it was transported, it was carried on poles. and when it was housed inside the inner sanctum of the tabernacle or the Temple of Solomon. Only the holiest of men were allowed near it, once a year, after intense ritual preparation. Why? What were they trying to protect people from? Or more chillingly, what were they trying to protect the Ark from? There are modern engineers who've speculated that the Ark may have functioned as a form of capacitor, not unlike the Baghdad battery, but on a much more powerful scale. With gold plates, conductive materials, and the right charge from natural sources, it might have stored and discharged static electricity. Or perhaps, if water or piezoelectric crystals were used, it could have amplified resonance frequencies. Whatever it was not ordinary, but the mystery goes deeper. Because the Ark, this legendary fearsome artifact, vanished, gone, disappeared from the historical record. Some say it was taken to Ethiopia, where it still resides in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion, guarded by monks who swear it's real, but who refuse to let anyone see it. Others believe it was hidden beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, or spirited away before the Babylonians destroyed the first temple, or that it lies buried under the sands of Egypt, forgotten by time, waiting to be rediscovered. But here's the real question. Was the Ark unique? Was it a one-of-a-kind relic built by divine instruction? Or was it one of many devices, a surviving piece of a much larger network of ancient technology? Were there other arks, other tools, other machines? And if so, where are they now? The Ark of the Covenant may be the most famous lost artifact in history. But maybe it's not just lost in geography. Maybe it's lost in translation, in understanding, in our willingness to see the past not as myth, but as memory. A memory of a world where the divine and the technological were one and the same. Because if the Ark was a machine, then the ancient world was far more advanced than we ever imagined. The Saqqara bird, evidence of ancient flight. In the arid heart of Egypt, where the desert meets the legacy of pharaohs, lies the vast necropolis of Saqqara. This is a place of burial, of silence, of secrets. And in 1898, inside a tomb dating back over 2,000 years, archaeologists unearthed a peculiar object. It was small, light, carved from sycamore wood. At first glance, it looked like a bird, a stylized falcon perhaps. But the more they studied it, the stranger it became. The artifact measured just over 7 inches in length, with sleek, forward-swept wings, a slender fuselage-like body, and, most curiously, a vertical tail fin. It had no feet, no flared tail feathers, no decorative markings, just clean, aerodynamic lines. It didn't resemble any known bird. And more importantly, it looked like it wasn't supposed to. It looked engineered. For decades, it was dismissed, catalogued simply as a bird-shaped toy, a whimsical offering for a child's tomb or an idol carving for religious ritual. But to those with eyes trained in the physics of flight, the Saqqara bird was something entirely different, something impossible. In the 1970s, a man named Dr. Khalil Messiha, an Egyptian aeronautical engineer and doctor, decided to test that theory. He built scale models based on the artifact's exact dimensions. Then he adjusted it, adding a horizontal stabilizer, a piece many believed may have been lost over time. And when he tested the model in wind tunnels and in open air, the results were stunning. It flew, not clumsily, not barely, but glided with balance and lift like a modern-day sailplane. Suddenly, what had been brushed off as a mere toy was revealing the fingerprints of aerodynamic engineering. So let's pause here and consider the implications. This wasn't a random carving. Its symmetry, its shape, its balance, they were all deliberate. The Saqqara bird wasn't decorative, it was functional. And that leads to a much bigger question. Did the ancient Egyptians experiment with flight? If that sounds impossible, consider this. The principles of flight are universal: lift, drag, thrust, and weight. These laws don't care what century you live in. If a civilization understood how air moves over a surface, how balance affects stability, and how materials behave in motion, they could have stumbled upon the same principles that define modern aviation. And Egypt, of all places, was no stranger to experimentation. They were master architects, mathematicians, astronomers. They built pyramids aligned with stars, designed complex irrigation systems, crafted surgical tools, and mapped the human body in ways that would influence medicine for centuries. So is it so unthinkable that they might have also explored the skies? Some scholars argue that the Saqqara bird could have been a prototype, a test model, something carved after observing birds in flight, not as worship, but as inspiration. But others take it further. What if the Saqqara bird wasn't just inspired by birds, but by machines? Some theorists believe this object is a replica, a miniature version of a much larger aircraft, possibly a glider, possibly even a powered vehicle, not one built by ancient Egyptians per se, but one witnessed by them, copied, revered, mythologized. Let's not forget, the Egyptian pantheon is filled with deities with wings, chariots of the sky, beings that came from the heavens and returned to them. Metaphor? Or memory? There's another clue, hidden not in the artifact itself, but in the language. In ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, the word Ba is often depicted as a human-headed bird. But Ba wasn't just a bird. It was the soul, the part of the human that could leave the body, fly across the skies, traverse the afterlife. What if those weren't just spiritual metaphors? What if flight, in the literal sense, was part of the spiritual toolkit of the elite, of priests, engineers, or initiates of a long-lost order? Now, let's widen the lens. Across the world, other artifacts suggest knowledge of aerodynamics and even aviation. In Colombia, golden pendants shaped like modern fighter jets have been recovered from pre-Incan tombs. They feature delta wings, stabilizing fins, and even tail rudders. Engineers from NASA have built scaled-up models of those artifacts, and they flew as well. In India, ancient texts like the Vimana Shastra describe flying machines called Vimanas. These weren't just poetic. They contained technical specifications, measurements, propulsion methods, materials, even instructions on anti-gravity propulsion and radar-like devices. Are all of these examples unrelated? Or are they fragments, remnants of an ancient global legacy, one that once knew how to fly? Back in Egypt, the Saqqara bird still sits in the Cairo Museum. Most visitors walk past it without a second glance. But now you know, it's not just a bird, it's a mystery carved in wood, a question that hangs in the air. Why did someone shape it this way? Why does it fly? And if they knew how to make it fly, what else did they make? Maybe the ancient world wasn't as earthbound as we think. Maybe they had their own era of aviation, brief, forgotten, erased by time, by conquest, by nature itself. A golden age of experimentation where men dreamed not just of building pyramids, but of touching the sky. And the Saqqara bird? It may be the last whisper of that forgotten dream. A reminder that long before our jet engines, before rockets pierced the heavens, someone else may have already soared above the deserts, gliding silently, mysteriously, into the winds of history. The Piri Reis map, evidence of ancient global navigation. In 1929, at the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a dusty scroll was found buried deep in an old bundle of forgotten artifacts. At first, it appeared to be just another navigational chart, a relic of the age of exploration. But as scholars examined it closer, they began to realize this wasn't just a map, it was a challenge to everything we think we know about ancient geography and ancient knowledge. The map is called the Piri Reis map, named after the Ottoman admiral and cartographer who created it in 1513. But Piri Reis didn't claim full authorship. In fact, he wrote detailed notes on the margins, saying his map was compiled using ancient sources, some going back to the time of Alexander the Great and even older. That's where things get strange. Because the Piri race map includes Antarctica. But not just any Antarctica, it shows a portion of the continent's coastline, free of ice. Now let that sink in. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, over 300 years after the Piri race map was drawn. And even when it was discovered, it was covered entirely in thick glacial ice. But on this ancient map, the continent appears with remarkable detail. Ice-free, with rivers, mountain ranges, a coastal profile that matches what modern seismic surveys only revealed in the 20th century, using ground-penetrating radar beneath the ice sheet. How could a map drawn in 1513 show the subglacial coastline of a continent that no one at the time even knew existed? One theory is simple and staggering. The map was based on much older maps created before Antarctica froze over, which would mean someone had explored the continent when its shores were still navigable, possibly thousands of years ago. Could it be that an ancient civilization, long before recorded history, had the ability to map the globe? Not just coastlines, but with accurate longitude and latitude, something modern navigators couldn't even calculate until the invention of the marine chronometer in the 18th century? If so, who were they? Piri race wasn't alone. Other ancient maps, like the Orontius Phineus map and the Boache map, also depict the Antarctic region with incredible precision. Again, long before such mapping should have been possible. And it doesn't stop there. The Piri race map also shows South America's east coast and Africa's west coast in near-perfect proportion. Even stranger, it connects the two in ways that suggest ancient seafarers may have had far better navigational understanding than previously believed. And then there are the annotations. In his own handwriting, Piri Reis mentions that the maps he used were drawn with knowledge passed down over millennia. He refers to them as coming from the time of the ancients, and says they were drawn with mathematics and an understanding of spherical geometry. This is critical, because it suggests that some ancient culture, possibly pre-Ice Age, had already developed spherical awareness of the Earth, a concept that wouldn't be widely accepted in Europe until centuries later. How could they know the true shape of continents? How could they chart thousands of miles of coastline across multiple continents with such accuracy? Without satellites, without aircraft, without computers. Unless they had tools we've forgotten, techniques lost to time, or worse, suppressed by centuries of historical gatekeeping and reinterpretation. Imagine what kind of technology would be required: long-distance seafaring vessels, advanced surveying tools, possibly aerial capabilities, instruments for measuring angles of stars with pinpoint precision. It's not just about boats and compasses. It's about data collection on a global scale, and all of it, apparently, compiled long before the rise of modern civilization. What if the Earth's last great maritime civilization existed not in the 15th century, but in 10,000 BCE? What if the melting of the last ice age and the floods it unleashed, events remembered in nearly every culture's mythology, wiped away an entire network of advanced cities, taking with them not just their people, but their knowledge, their science, and their maps? And what we're left with are faint echoes, fragments, like the Piri race map, mysterious, out of place, and impossible by modern standards. But there it is, ink on parchment, coastlines no one should have known, precision that defies the tools of its era, and a whisper from across time that says, we were here, we knew, and we saw the world. The Piri race map isn't just a cartographic anomaly, it's a breadcrumb, one that points to a far older story. A story of explorers, scientists, and mapmakers whose civilizations may have risen and fallen before ours even began. And now, we're only starting to see the outline of their knowledge, faint but undeniable, beneath the ice of forgotten history. The stone spheres of Costa Rica, ancient geometric precision, or lost energy network. Hidden beneath dense jungle canopies, among the shadows of banana plantations and rivers of southern Costa Rica, lie hundreds of silent sentinels, perfectly round, cold, heavy, impossibly smooth. They are called Las Bolas, the stone spheres of Costa Rica, and their origin is one of the greatest unsolved archaeological mysteries of the ancient world. Some weigh as little as a few kilograms. Others tip the scales at over 15 tons. But no matter the size, their defining feature is always the same: near-perfect spherical geometry. Made of solid granodiorite, a material harder than steel in places, these spheres seem almost unnatural in their precision, like they were not carved, but manufactured. There are more than 300 of them known to exist, scattered across the Decrease Delta, buried deep beneath the rainforest floor, discovered by accident in the 1930s by workers clearing land for the United Fruit Company. At first, no one believed they were real. Some thought they were meteorites. Others said they must be some kind of natural geological formation. But when archaeologists began digging deeper, literally and figuratively, they realized this was something else entirely. These stones were man-made, shaped with such care and exactitude that their smoothness rivals modern ball bearings. Some vary in diameter by less than a single millimeter. Pause and think about that. How did an ancient people, without iron tools, without compasses or leveling instruments, achieve such precise spherical symmetry? No chisel marks remain. No unfinished prototypes have ever been found. And perhaps most frustratingly, there are no surviving texts, symbols, or legends that explain why these spheres were created at all. Their creators? Unknown. Their purpose? A mystery? Their precision? Impossible, at least by conventional standards. Some were found aligned in straight lines. Others formed triangles, rectangles, and even astronomically significant patterns, matching constellations like Orion. But many have been moved from their original locations, displacing any potential meaning that their alignments once carried. The mainstream explanation is vague. Ceremonial use, perhaps? Territorial markers? Status symbols for elite households? But the deeper you go, the less sense it makes. Why carve hundreds of spheres, requiring massive time and labor, only to scatter them across miles of jungle with no inscription, no temple, no central monument? Unless the spheres were the monument, some researchers propose a far more radical theory, that these stone spheres were part of a vast geoenergetic grid, an ancient network not unlike ley lines designed to balance or harness subtle energies in the Earth. Their spherical shape would allow energy to radiate evenly in all directions. Perhaps they functioned like tuning forks, harmonizing with the Earth's natural frequencies, aiding in healing, communication, or even power transmission. Science fiction, or the remnants of a forgotten science? Let's remember, ancient cultures around the world placed enormous importance on geometric harmony. The flower of life, sacred geometry, golden ratios, the understanding that shapes, vibration, and energy were all interconnected. If the builders of the spheres possessed that knowledge, then perhaps these stones weren't just decorative, they were functional. Even more fascinating is the idea that these spheres could have been magnetically active. Some experiments suggest slight magnetic anomalies near certain spheres, though no comprehensive study has ever been completed. What if the stones were positioned to act like nodes in a planetary energy grid, like acupuncture points on the Earth itself? And then there's the possibility no one wants to say out loud, not on record, that maybe, just maybe, the spheres weren't entirely made by human hands. That perhaps the reason no tool marks remain, no prototypes exist, no unfinished examples lie abandoned in quarries, is because the technology used was far more advanced than stone tools. Perhaps it involved sonic shaping, a lost technique using resonance or vibration to mold matter on a molecular level, a technology hinted at in ancient myths across the world. The kind of technique that modern science is only beginning to grasp, because shaping stone with hand tools is one thing, but shaping stone into a perfect sphere with no visible seams or chisel trails is something else entirely. Something out of place. Something out of time. So what are these spheres? Navigation markers for sky-based travelers? A code waiting to be unlocked? Or warnings? Markers left by a civilization that vanished long ago, leaving only these strange globes as evidence of their knowledge, their precision, and their power? Whatever they are, the jungle keeps their secret well. And while rain, roots, and time continue to wear them down, the mystery only grows stronger. Because each sphere tells us something we've forgotten. That once, someone cared enough to carve the earth into perfect shapes. And then they disappeared, leaving behind silence, symmetry, and questions. The Lycurgus Cup, Nanotechnology in Ancient Rome. In a quiet, climate-controlled room of the British Museum sits a cup. It's small, just over 6 inches tall, made of glass, framed in ornate metalwork. At first glance, it seems like any other relic of Rome's long-forgotten elegance. But this cup isn't normal, because when light hits it from the front, it appears a pale green. But when light shines through it from behind, something extraordinary happens. The entire cup shifts color. It turns a deep, glowing red, not painted, not coated, transformed. This isn't a trick of dyes or pigments. It's not an illusion. What you're witnessing is something modern scientists couldn't explain until 1,600 years after it was made. This is the Lycurgus Cup, a mysterious artifact from the 4th century CE and quite possibly the oldest known example of nanotechnology in human history. That's right, nanotechnology. Modern physicists were stunned when they finally analyzed the cup using electron microscopy. They discovered that the glass was laced, on purpose, with nanoparticles of gold and silver, each just a few billionths of a meter across. Particles so small, they interact with light on a quantum level. When light hits them, the particles cause the wavelengths to scatter in specific ways, literally changing the color of the glass based on how light is absorbed or reflected. But here's the twist. To achieve this effect, you need to control the size and spacing of metal particles with precision measured in nanometers. That's 1/1000th the width of a human hair. Something even modern engineers only began mastering in the late 20th century. So how did Roman artisans, over 1,600 years ago, manipulate materials at a scale that supposedly requires electron beams and vacuum chambers? Mainstream archaeology will tell you it was an accident, a lucky result of throwing ground-up metal dust into glass. But does that explanation really hold? Let's think logically. The cup's creators weren't merely experimenting. They embedded these particles consistently, in exact proportions and depths, to produce a controlled optical response. This isn't random. This is intentional photonic engineering. And it gets even more curious. The subject of the cup's decoration? The myth of King Lycurgus, a ruler who defied the gods and was punished, entangled in vines, until his madness consumed him. A cautionary tale about pushing too far into forbidden knowledge. Fitting, isn't it? Because the cup itself suggests a level of material science that seems almost forbidden for its time. There are no other known Roman objects that display this exact effect. No workshop notes, no recorded techniques. It appears as an anomaly, a singular creation, as if it came from somewhere else. So what are the possibilities? Some suggest that this knowledge came from older sources, perhaps preserved from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, then lost again after the fall of Rome. Others go further. They suggest the Romans inherited secrets from a far earlier civilization, one with technological abilities we can no longer replicate. A culture that understood materials, science, optics, and nanoengineering, perhaps even vibration-based manipulation of particles. The kind of lost knowledge passed down through myths, disguised as divine gifts. The Lycurgus cup forces us to confront the question, what if ancient societies did possess knowledge that rivaled our own in very specific domains, like metallurgy, acoustics, or light? What if we're not advancing in a straight line, but simply rediscovering what once was? Today, we use nanoparticles in medical applications, solar panels, quantum computing. We build materials that respond to stimuli, light, heat, even emotion. But what if that concept isn't as new as we think? What if we're standing on the shoulders of forgotten giants? The Lycurgus cup is more than a beautiful artifact. It's a technological fingerprint, a whisper from the past that says, "You don't know everything." 1,000 years before the microscope, someone out there understood how to manipulate matter at the scale of atoms, and then, just as suddenly, that knowledge vanished. Or was it hidden, lost beneath layers of conquest, collapse, and rewritten history? All we know for sure is this: the cup exists. It defies explanation. And it tells us one thing with absolute clarity: ancient people were far more advanced than we've been led to believe. In the heart of ancient India, buried not beneath stone, but beneath language, there lies a mystery too vast for textbooks and too dangerous for the mainstream to fully acknowledge. It begins not with an artifact, but with a manuscript, a Sanskrit text called the Vimana Shastra. Its title means the science of aeronautics. It was said to be dictated in the early 20th century by a mystic under trance, channeling knowledge from an ancient sage. And at first glance, it reads like mythology. Blueprints, diagrams, technical instructions, detailed references to propulsion systems, materials, flight maneuvers, even anti-gravity principles. The document claims to describe technology from over 6,000 years ago, and it centers around one word: Vimana. In ancient Indian epics, Vimanas were flying palaces, chariots of the gods, capable of moving not just through the air, but between planets. The Mahabharata describes them in vivid detail, machines shaped like spheres and cylinders, glowing with light, making thunderous sounds, and leaving fire trails as they moved through the sky. Some could hover motionless, others could ascend vertically. A few were described as capable of cloaking, using metals that could absorb sunlight or reflect light around them. These aren't vague spiritual metaphors. These are engineering notes, descriptions of lift, propulsion, and materials that, if taken seriously, imply a civilization with aerodynamic knowledge thousands of years before the Wright brothers were born. Now here's where it gets stranger. The Vimana Shastra outlines 3 types of energy sources for flight: combustion, solar, and something called mercurial vortex propulsion. The aircraft described could generate centrifugal force, use gyroscopic balancing, and even manipulate gravity fields. One passage describes the use of a crystal called Rohini, which could harness cosmic energy. Another details the composition of alloys capable of withstanding extreme heat during atmospheric re-entry. It even warns against certain materials that attract electricity or disrupt magnetic flow. If this is just fiction, then it's astonishingly technical fiction. Fiction with a level of mechanical specificity that modern engineers have struggled to fully translate. But this isn't the only source. Ancient temples in India, particularly in Ellora, Hampi, and Khajuraho, feature carvings that resemble rockets, fuselages, and even pilots wearing helmets. Not stylized angels or birds, but machines. There are even accounts of ancient wars fought in the skies, where cities were destroyed by weapons that sounded eerily like modern missiles. The Mahabharata describes weapons that produced columns of smoke and fire brighter than 1,000 suns, causing victims to lose hair and nails. Their skin burned, what sounds like the after effects of radiation. Again, how did people thousands of years ago imagine this level of devastation? Unless they witnessed it? Let's go deeper. Some scholars and truth seekers have suggested that Vimanas weren't just myth, but actual flying machines left over from a prehistoric advanced civilization, perhaps from before the last ice age. Others say the knowledge was gifted by extraterrestrials, mistaken for gods who came to Earth and shared technology, but only with those capable of understanding and safeguarding it. And then there's the most mind-bending possibility. That time isn't linear. That ancient sages tapped into quantum fields or Akashic records, universal knowledge accessible through altered states of consciousness. In that state, they saw visions of future technologies, maybe even our own time. That the Vaimanika Shastra isn't a record of the past, but a reflection of all time, past and future, encoded in consciousness itself. In the 1970s, a team of Indian scientists attempted to build a model based on the Shastra's instructions. The result? The design was unstable, but only by modern standards. The team admitted the text referred to propulsion and material science in ways decades ahead of their own understanding, as if the writer was describing technology that could only be fully grasped with knowledge we don't have yet. Are Vimanas mythic dreams? Or blueprints? And if ancient India once possessed the power of flight, advanced metallurgy, and aerial weaponry, what happened? Did that knowledge get buried under conquest, colonization, and suppression? Or was it intentionally hidden, locked within temple vaults and guarded by secret traditions for generations? Because maybe, just maybe, that kind of knowledge was never meant for just anyone. The Chinese magic mirrors, bronze reflections, and the science we can't replicate. In a dim-lit chamber in an old museum in Tokyo, a relic rests quietly under glass. It's a bronze mirror, circular, polished, etched with markings of ancient beauty. Made in China over 2,000 years ago, during the Han Dynasty. It looks like a ceremonial object, a piece of elegant craftsmanship from a time long gone. But then the lights dim further. A beam of light is pointed at the mirror's polished front, and something impossible happens. The light that bounces off the mirror and projects onto the wall reveals a hidden image, one that matches the design engraved on the back of the mirror. Let that sink in. The mirror reflects an image that's not on its face, but on its back. How? This is the mystery of the Chinese magic mirror. For over 1,000 years, these bronze mirrors have baffled scholars, scientists, and engineers. Ancient Chinese artisans somehow manufactured these objects so that when light reflects from their surface, it produces an image, usually of a dragon, a deity, or a cryptic symbol, that isn't actually visible on the mirror's face. The surface looks smooth, uniform, perfect. And yet, the hidden image appears. To this day, the exact technique remains unknown. Modern theories suggest that during casting and polishing, the surface is subtly deformed at the microscopic level, so subtly that it doesn't change the appearance to the naked eye. But the way those micro-deformations bend light, especially polarized light, causes the mirror to function like a lens, projecting the hidden design onto a wall. But here's the issue. No one can replicate this with complete accuracy using ancient methods. Even with today's advanced tools, creating this exact effect without digital etching or lasers is extremely difficult. And the ancients didn't just make one of these, they made hundreds. Found all across China, Japan, and Korea, each bearing different symbols, messages, and meanings. Many were buried with nobles, some were used in temples, others in secret ceremonies. And in almost every case, the full purpose of the mirrors remains unclear. Some researchers believe the mirrors were used for divination, a kind of portal into hidden truth. Others say they were used to channel energy during rituals, reflecting not just light, but intention. A few scholars suggest the mirrors played a role in ancient surveillance or communication systems designed to pass messages through coded projections that only the trained eye could recognize. But there's a darker theory, too, that these mirrors weren't just optical tricks. but tools of psychological control. Imagine a time before electricity, before science as we know it. You're in a temple. A high priest stands before you. He lifts a polished bronze mirror to the sun. And from that mirror, without touching it, the image of a dragon appears on the wall beside you. What would you think? To the uninitiated, it would seem like divine power, magic, a sign from the heavens. These mirrors could have been used to solidify authority, convince the masses, and manipulate the perception of reality. But perhaps the most intriguing clue lies not in the mirrors themselves, but in the mindset that created them. Because the Chinese weren't just creating decorative objects. They were working with light, reflection, and precision metallurgy in ways that suggest a deeper understanding of physics than most believe ancient people possessed. They understood how surface tension, microscopic deformation, and metallic resonance interacted to manipulate photons long before modern optics were born. And if they understood that, what else did they know? Did they possess secret techniques, passed down in oral tradition, lost when dynasties fell and libraries burned? Did they guard this knowledge, keeping it hidden from invaders and colonizers? Or was this just one fragment of a far older inheritance, one that connected distant civilizations across the globe? Because when you compare the Chinese magic mirrors with ancient obsidian mirrors from Mesoamerica or polished crystal devices from Mesopotamia, the pattern becomes undeniable. Ancient civilizations were obsessed with light. They weren't just using it, they were engineering it. And now, in our modern world of lasers, fiber optics, and holograms, we're only beginning to catch up. So the next time you hold a mirror, look deeper, because the reflection you see might not be the whole story. And sometimes the truth hides, not on the surface, but in the way light bends around secrets. The Yonaguni Monument, Japan's sunken enigma, and the ruins that shouldn't exist. Off the coast of Japan's Ryukyu Islands beneath the waves of the East China Sea lies a riddle carved in stone, an underwater structure so massive, so precise, and so deliberately designed that it forces us to question everything we thought we knew about human history. This is the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered in 1986 by a diver exploring shark migration routes, the monument lies about 25 meters beneath the surface. At first, it looked like a natural formation, just a curious arrangement of rocks and steps. But as divers, geologists, and archaeologists returned, they realized this was not a fluke of nature. The structure is massive, over 500 feet long and 90 feet wide. It features flat, clean-cut terraces, right-angled steps, and staircases that descend with architectural symmetry. There are what appear to be columns, pathways, and even something resembling an amphitheater. But it's what lies beyond the shapes that truly stirs the mind. Because Yonaguni sits on the ocean floor, and no known civilization existed in this region when it would have last been above sea level. That was over 10,000 years ago. Let's pause there. If Yonaguni was carved when it was still dry land, that places its construction at the end of the last ice age, thousands of years before the Egyptian pyramids, thousands of years before Stonehenge, and long before any known organized society was supposed to have the knowledge or manpower to build something of this scale. So who built it, and why is it underwater? Some experts, like marine geologist Dr. Masaki Kimura, argue that the structure is man-made, pointing to its sharp edges, directional channels, and what appear to be symbolic carvings, including a massive humanoid face etched into the rock and strange petroglyphs worn by time but still visible. Kimura believes the site was once a complex city, possibly destroyed by an earthquake and swallowed by the sea, a catastrophic event that erased it from history and memory. But mainstream archaeologists are skeptical. They argue the monument is natural, formed by tectonic fractures and erosion. Yet that doesn't explain the perfect angles, the multi-tiered platforms, or the altars that seem too symmetrical to be chance. Now imagine this. At the end of the last ice age, global sea levels rose dramatically. Entire coastal civilizations could have been drowned, their cities and cultures buried beneath the ocean, waiting to be rediscovered. What if Yonaguni is just the tip of an ancient underwater network, a relic of a lost people who once knew the art of megalithic engineering? What if it's connected to Plato's Atlantis, or the Mu continent spoken of in Pacific legends? What if the Yonaguni monument is part of a forgotten chapter in human history, one in which early humans weren't primitive tribesmen, but inheritors of knowledge from a vanished golden age? Some fringe researchers believe Yonaguni may have served as a temple, a port, or even a ceremonial hub aligned with the stars. The stairs and platforms may not just be architectural, they may be astronomical instruments, tracking solstices and celestial events like those found in South American and Egyptian monuments. Others speculate something even wilder, that the structure was not just functional, but vibrational. With flat stone surfaces and a layout reminiscent of cymatic resonance patterns, could Yonaguni have been designed to channel energy, like sound, water, or even electromagnetic frequencies? If so, what was it powering? What was it trying to connect with? And why does the structure feel so eerily familiar, even though it's supposedly older than any human city? These are the questions no one can fully answer, because no excavation can happen at those depths, not easily. And without full permission from governments and institutions, Yonaguni remains an enigma locked beneath the sea, slowly being claimed by coral and silence. But we must ask ourselves this: if one megalithic structure, precise, massive, aligned, lies beneath the sea, how many more are waiting? How much of humanity's story is submerged, waiting for us to rediscover it, not in textbooks, but in currents, sand, and stone? Because beneath the waves, time doesn't erase history, it preserves it. The Olmec magnetic heads, ancient Mesoamerican magnetism, and the helmets of unknown purpose. In the steamy jungles of modern-day Mexico, long before the towering cities of the Maya or the obsidian blades of the Aztecs, a civilization rose with no known origin. We call them the Olmecs, but we don't know what they called themselves. All we really know is this: they were building colossal stone monuments before the Bible was written. They were shaping entire cities out of jungle earth. And they were carving heads, enormous basalt heads, each weighing between 6 to 50 tons, each carved with such precision, such individualized detail, that they resemble portraits, not of gods, but of actual people. Their faces wear expressions, stern, reflective, wise. They all wear distinctive helmets. Some say they're ceremonial, others say they're protective. But no one really knows. And here's where the mystery deepens. In the early 1970s, a team of scientists led by Dr. Michael Coe performed an unusual test on one of these heads using magnetometers. And what they found was something completely unexpected. Several of the heads, especially one known as San Lorenzo Monument 1, had specific magnetic hotspots. Places on the sculpture where a compass would swing wildly, breaking from Earth's magnetic pull. Not randomly, but in exact locations. The temple of the head, the right cheek, the base of the helmet. Incredibly, the magnetism appeared intentional. This wasn't just a random anomaly in the stone. The stone was naturally magnetized. Yes, but the heads were carved in such a way that the strongest magnetic points aligned with symbolic areas of the face. Almost as if the sculptors knew exactly how to interact with the magnetism already present in the stone. Let that sink in. These sculptures are over 3,000 years old, and yet they exhibit signs of magnetic engineering. The question is, how? Magnetism, in terms of formal discovery, didn't enter human science until around the 11th century in China. Compasses, lodestones, navigation by magnetics? That came thousands of years after the Olmec heads were already standing silently in the jungle. So how did they detect these magnetic points? Did they possess primitive compasses? Did they observe natural magnetism through some forgotten form of experimentation? Or were they using intuitive knowledge passed down from an even older, now lost people? Some researchers speculate that the Olmecs may have used magnetite, a naturally occurring magnetic mineral, to sense and align the fields. That they might have ground it into powder or used floating pieces of it in water to detect anomalies in stones or land. But even if that's true, why build statues with those specific alignments? Why embed magnetic markers in helmets, cheeks, brows, and mouths? Here's where the theories split. One idea: these weren't just sculptures, they were magnetic maps, part of a larger system. A kind of coded spiritual technology meant to channel energy, possibly even communicate with celestial phenomena. Another idea? The helmets weren't helmets at all, but cranial resonance chambers. Symbolic or functional devices meant to amplify electromagnetic frequencies within the brain. Some say these helmets indicate knowledge of the pineal gland, the so-called third eye, often associated with consciousness, spiritual awareness, and magnetic sensitivity in animal species. Could the Olmecs have known that certain areas of the brain are sensitive to Earth's magnetic fields? Modern neuroscience is just beginning to uncover the possibility that humans may possess a magnetic sense, a biological compass. It's primitive, dormant, but real. What if the Olmecs didn't just know this, but designed entire statues to trigger, harmonize, or reflect that resonance? Now let's go even wilder. Several Olmec heads are aligned, not just with magnetic anomalies, but with celestial events. Their orientation, facing specific directions, could be part of a wider geomantic grid, one that connected the sky, the earth, and the flow of energy between them. If true, that places the Olmecs not just as builders, but as cosmic engineers, tuning their monuments not just to celebrate power or lineage, but to harmonize with the planet itself. Still, the mainstream avoids these questions, because if you accept that the Olmecs were capable of detecting and shaping magnetic fields, then you have to ask what else they understood. Electricity? Resonance? Consciousness? Even their writing, known as the Epi-Olmec script, remains mostly undeciphered. It includes symbols that resemble both Mayan glyphs and something entirely different, like fragments of a language older than the land itself. And remember, this was the first civilization in Mesoamerica. There was no one before them, no culture to borrow from. So either they developed this knowledge from scratch, or they inherited it from someone or something before them. Because these heads, they weren't just monuments, they were messages, locked in stone, charged with magnetic memory, waiting for a time when the world would once again understand the language of energy, stone, and sky. Ancient sound technology, the forgotten power of sonic architecture and resonant tuning. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're standing in the center of a colossal stone chamber. The air feels dense, not heavy, but alive. You let out a single note, just your voice, and suddenly it echoes back in waves. It grows louder, sharper, deeper. The sound doesn't die. It resonates. It pulses through the floor, through your body, through the stone itself. It feels like the room is singing with you. This isn't science fiction. This is ancient sound technology, and it's everywhere once you start looking. Let's begin in Chavin de Huantar, Peru. A 3,000-year-old temple complex carved into the Andes. Deep within it lies a narrow stone labyrinth. The passageways twist and turn, lined with monolithic blocks. And inside these tunnels, archaeologists have found something astonishing. The rooms and corridors were built to channel sound. They act like acoustic tubes, amplifying voices and instruments, bouncing them in strange directions. Priests could stand hidden in corners, play shell trumpets known as pututas, and make their voices sound like they were coming from everywhere at once, or from the gods themselves. This wasn't random. These chambers were acoustically engineered to control perception, to induce trance states, to project divine power. And it doesn't stop there. At megalithic sites across the world, from Stonehenge in England to the hypogem of Hal Saflieni in Malta, the architecture itself is tuned to specific frequencies that affect the human body, especially the brain. In the hypogem, a subterranean temple over 5,000 years old, there's one chamber known as the Oracle Room, where certain tones cause the entire space to vibrate, not just acoustically, but physiologically. Studies have shown that tones between 95 and 120 Hz, when chanted or sung inside that chamber, can alter human consciousness, lowering heart rate, slowing brainwaves, even inducing hallucinations. Think about that. Thousands of years before EEGs or sound baths or neuroscience, ancient builders were crafting spaces that acted like resonance chambers for the mind. So how did they know? How did cultures separated by continents, who supposedly had no contact, design structures that manipulate sound with such precision? Some believe the ancients discovered the principles of cymatics, the science of visualizing sound. When certain frequencies pass through a surface like sand or water, they form patterns, intricate, symmetrical, geometric. Modern cymatics experiments show that sound creates shape. Now imagine using that knowledge with stone. What if ancient builders used drums, horns, or chants not just in ceremony, but in engineering? What if sound wasn't just sacred, it was functional? There are countless legends that hint at this. The Egyptians claimed that massive blocks of stone at the pyramids were moved with sound. Tibetan monks were said to use gongs and mantras to lift stones up cliffs. In Coral Castle, Florida, a modern mystery, builder Edward Leeds Calnan allegedly moved multi-ton stones by himself, claiming to know the secrets of the ancients. Many believe he was using resonant frequencies. He left behind no blueprints, no crew, just perfectly balanced stones weighing up to 30 tons, fit together without mortar, and still standing. Now let's go deeper. Recent experiments have shown that sound waves can levitate small objects using acoustic pressure. In labs, scientists have suspended tiny spheres of plastic, metal, even water droplets, mid-air, just using focused sound. Scale that up. Add thousands of years of hidden knowledge, add sacred geometry, add resonance chambers built into natural landscapes. You begin to see the possibility. What if stone could be softened or lifted using sound? What if megaliths weren't carved, but tuned? Some theories go even further, that sound was used to heal, to store information, or even to open consciousness. We now know certain frequencies, like 432 Hz and 528 Hz, can synchronize brainwaves, stimulate cellular repair, and alter emotional states. Is it so hard to believe that ancient societies may have discovered and harnessed this? The ancients didn't separate science from spirit. Their temples were machines. Their rituals were experiments. Their voices, instruments, and stones, parts of one unified system. A system we've forgotten, but one that still works, if you know how to listen. So the next time you visit a ruin, a cave, or a sacred site, don't just look, speak, sing, human. Hear how the stone responds. Because these places weren't just built to last, they were built to resonate, and sound, like memory, never dies. It just waits to be heard again. The mystery of ancient drills, precision, boring in the age of copper tools. We've all seen it, giant pyramids, towering statues, endless walls of stone fitted so tightly that not even a razor blade fits between them. But here's a question almost no one asks. How did they drill? How did ancient civilizations, supposedly limited to stone hammers and copper chisels, bore perfectly straight, deep, symmetrical holes into granite and basalt, some of the hardest stones on Earth? Because they did. We've found the evidence. Let's go to Egypt, to the site of Abu Sir. Among the ruins lies a mysterious object, a core sample taken from granite. It's not just a chunk of stone, it's a spiral-shaped cylindrical core left behind from drilling. But here's the kicker. The spiral pattern on this core suggests a feed rate, a rate at which the drill advanced through the granite, so aggressive, so fast, that it would be difficult even for modern diamond-tipped drills to match. This single artifact defies logic. You're talking about drilling through crystalline granite with a tool that leaves regular spiral grooves, as if the bit was not just spinning, but applying immense pressure and speed. Even more puzzling? There are hundreds of these mysterious holes across ancient Egypt, some in the core blocks of temples, others inside granite sarcophagi, perfectly aligned and polished smooth. They are perfect circles, often in straight lines with uniform depths and diameters. Some are as small as an inch wide, others as large as a man's chest. And yet, according to mainstream archaeology, the tools available at the time were copper chisels, stone pounders, and manual labor. Let's be clear here. Copper is softer than granite. You can bend a copper chisel by hand. The idea that this metal could create such clean, consistent bores in granite over and over again isn't just improbable. It's physically impossible. So what happened here? Let's look at the theories. 1. The lost high-tech hypothesis. Some researchers believe that the ancient Egyptians, especially during the Old Kingdom, had access to a forgotten set of high-efficiency tools. Not lasers or UFOs, but mechanical drills using advanced methods, possibly ultrasonic drilling, abrasive slurry, or resonant frequencies. These devices may have operated with rotating heads tipped with a harder-than-steel material, perhaps even unknown to us today. There's a theory that these ancient tools used vibration, similar to how modern ultrasonic dental equipment works. Vibrate a metal tool at a high frequency, apply abrasive powder like quartz or sand, and suddenly, you can slice through granite without pressure. 2. The ancient geopolymer theory. Others propose that the ancients didn't carve these holes, they poured them. That is, the stone wasn't stone at all when the holes were made. It was a man-made geopolymer, like concrete. In this theory, the stone was cast into molds, possibly even around solid rods or forms, which were then removed after hardening. It's a radical idea, but certain stones, especially in Peru and Egypt, show signs of being chemically altered on the surface. Could they have known how to soften stone temporarily? Could they have unlocked a chemical process to work the hardest materials, like clay? 3. The resonance theory. Let's go even deeper. There are signs across the ancient world, especially at sacred sites, that point to the use of vibrational energy. We talked about this in the previous section. But what if it wasn't just for consciousness? What if it was used to manipulate matter? Could they have used sound to weaken the atomic bonds of stone, temporarily, just enough to drill through it with ease? We've only recently begun experimenting with acoustic levitation, vibration-based material weakening, and sonic cutting tools. What if this is simply the rediscovery of something ancient? Let's not forget the tools left behind. In 1881, the famous Egyptologist Flinders Petrie discovered several drill cores and stone tubes in Egypt. He was shocked. The spiral grooves were uniform. The precision was undeniable. He wrote that the drill marks indicated a technique that exceeds the mechanical power of the modern drill. And remember, this was over 100 years ago, long before our current tech. So what happened to these tools? Some believe they were made of iron, even tungsten alloys, long before we believe such metals were smelted. Others think they were non-metallic, crystal-based, or even using energy fields. Sounds crazy? Maybe. But then again, so does drilling perfect holes into granite with copper chisels. And this phenomenon isn't limited to Egypt. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, we find holes drilled at perfect angles into diorite, a stone as hard as diamond. In India's Ellora caves, entire temples carved into solid cliff faces feature intricate drill marks in high-ceiling chambers. Even in Petra, Jordan, the carved facades show signs of deep, methodical boring, tools spinning with calculated force. These are not the marks of random effort. These are the fingerprints of technology. Technology we've lost. So the question remains, not just how they drilled, but why? Was it purely architectural? Or were these holes part of a larger system, aligned with energy grids, sound frequencies, or even astronomical movements? Were they meant to hold something, or to channel something? Maybe we'll never know, or maybe we're only a few discoveries away. One thing's for sure, every perfect borehole left behind by an ancient hand is a challenge, not to their intelligence, but to our arrogance. The legend of the Shamir, King Solomon's stone-cutting worm, and the missing tech of the temple builders. Picture ancient Jerusalem. The Temple of Solomon is under construction, but this isn't just any building. It's said to be the dwelling place of the divine, crafted from massive stones so precise, so perfectly fit, that no mortar was needed, no gaps, no errors. But here's the twist. According to ancient Hebrew texts, including the Talmud, Midrash, and later Kabbalistic writings, no metal tools were used to build the first temple. Why? Because iron, often used for war and death, was considered inappropriate for the sacred act of temple construction. So how then were the stones shaped? Cut? Fitted? That's where the Shamir comes in. Described in ancient sources as a tiny worm or sometimes as a stone, the Shamir had a singular, unbelievable power. It could cut through stone, iron, and diamond, not with force, not with heat, but simply by touching it. Wherever the Shamir was directed, the material split cleanly, as if sliced by an invisible blade. One version says it was wrapped in wool and stored in a lead container to prevent it from destroying anything around it, because even lead couldn't contain its energy unless thick enough. Another tale claims King Solomon kept it hidden deep in the earth, guarded by spirits or genies. At first glance, it sounds like pure fantasy. A magical worm that can dissolve stone? But here's where it gets interesting. What if the Shamir isn't a metaphor, but a misunderstood ancient technology? Let's explore the possibilities. 1. A biochemical cutting agent? The description of the Shamir as a living creature might hint at something biological. Certain modern bacteria can digest rock, etch metal, or secrete acidic compounds that dissolve hard surfaces. What if the Shamir was a type of engineered organism or a biologically produced substance that could be guided with precision? We now use biomining microbes to extract gold and rare earth minerals. The concept of life-based cutting agents isn't science fiction anymore. It's science fact. Could ancient civilizations have cultivated a creature or a biosubstance that could dissolve rock along pre-drawn lines? 2. A laser-like energy tool. Some researchers speculate that the Shamir was actually an energy device, a kind of plasma torch, focused vibration beam, or even a directed frequency tool capable of disrupting the molecular bonds of stone without physical contact. In this version, the worm is a metaphor, an ancient attempt to describe a tool that moved or glowed like a living thing. Think of how a welding arc behaves, squirming, humming, cutting without touching. To ancient eyes, this might easily resemble a serpent or worm. The ancients may have encoded the truth in metaphor, knowing that the public wouldn't understand, or wasn't meant to. 3. The lost crystal technology theory. The Shamir is also described in some texts as shining or radiating. This raises the question, could it have been a type of crystal-based cutting tool? Certain crystals, when stimulated, can release powerful frequencies or concentrate energy. Piezoelectric crystals like quartz can generate voltage under pressure. Combine that with the idea of resonance, sound, light, or frequency manipulation, and you have a tool that may not cut in the traditional sense, but fractures material from within. A handheld object powered by natural forces, designed not to grind through stone, but to command it to split. There's even a strange coincidence in the fact that Solomonite, a rare stone named after the king, has unique thermal and electrical properties. Is it just a coincidence, or a forgotten nod to the Shamir's true nature? 4th, symbolic technology passed through. Myth. Even if the Shamir was never real in the literal sense, the legend holds deep symbolic power. In many esoteric traditions, the act of cutting stone without metal symbolizes transcendence over base materialism, the mastery of the elements through higher knowledge. In this sense, the Shamir could represent a lost spiritual science, a union of consciousness and technology, of sacred intention and advanced tools. Think about this. Almost every advanced ancient society built in stone, and almost everyone has myths about tools or abilities that defy modern understanding. In Egypt, it's said Thoth used the word to shape reality. In India, the gods wielded divine weapons that altered matter. In Mesoamerica, the stones themselves were said to be alive, responding to rituals and song. Are these all just stories? Or did the ancients know something we forgot? The Shamir, real or metaphor, forces us to ask the deeper question. Could humanity once manipulate matter with tools we no longer recognize as tools? Tools that work not through brute force, but through alignment, of sound, of energy, of intention, and if so, could we find it again? Or was the Shamir never lost, only hidden, waiting, like the temple it built, like the truth behind the myth, right in front of us? The underground cities of Derinkuyu, subterranean engineering beyond explanation. In the heart of Cappadocia, central Turkey, lies a landscape straight out of another planet. Volcanic pillars, strange domes, and soft rock carved into flowing shapes by wind, time, and human hands. But what lies beneath is even more astounding. Let's talk about Derinkuyu. Discovered by accident in 1963 when a man knocked down a wall in his basement and found a tunnel behind it. Derinkuyu is not a cave. It is a multi-level underground city with at least 18 levels, stretching over 200 feet deep into the earth. At its peak, it could house 20,000 to 30,000 people, along with their livestock, food stores, wine cellars, wells, ventilation shafts, religious rooms, classrooms, kitchens, and even massive rolling stone doors designed to seal entire corridors from the inside. Just pause there. A city underground, carved by hand, in a time when there were supposedly no machines, no industrial tools, no electricity, and yet the engineering is flawless. Air shafts were carved in such a way that oxygen circulated efficiently, even at the deepest levels. Wells were dug to reach fresh water. Food storage areas were designed to preserve grains, vegetables, and wine for long periods. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. This wasn't a one-off. There are hundreds of these underground complexes across Cappadocia. Some are connected by miles of tunnels, running deep under the earth. Derinkuyu is just the largest one discovered, and no one knows who built them. Mainstream archaeologists say the Hittites around 1200 BCE. Others say early Christians expanded the tunnels to hide from Roman persecution. But those explanations don't add up. Because the foundation layers, the deepest and most sophisticated tunnels, are far older. Some geological surveys suggest that the lowest chambers may be at least 5,000 to 10,000 years old, or older. So here's the question. Why would ancient people go to such lengths? And how did they do it? Let's start with the how. Carving out volcanic tuff isn't like carving soft limestone. It's brittle, and large sections can collapse if you don't understand structural stress. Yet these tunnels show no signs of major collapse. The support columns, room placement, and even weight distribution were meticulously planned. No soot marks exist in the ceilings, suggesting they may not have used fire-based light sources like torches. So how did they see? And more importantly, what were they afraid of? That brings us to the why. The mainstream theory is that people built these cities to escape invading armies, maybe Romans, Arabs, or Mongols. But how do you justify millions of cubic feet of excavation to hide for a few weeks? Why build multiple levels reaching 200 feet underground with massive stone doors at each corridor? Why connect multiple cities by miles-long escape tunnels? Unless they weren't just hiding from invaders, they were hiding from something else. Some believe the underground cities were built in response to a cosmic cataclysm, like the Younger Dryas impact or even ancient nuclear events recorded in myths. In this version of history, surface life became temporarily uninhabitable, whether due to radiation, climate chaos, or atmospheric toxins. Others believe they were designed to withstand seismic waves from planet-wide disasters, or even deliberate attacks from advanced enemies, human or otherwise. Let's get deeper. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of gods battling with terrible weapons that burned the sky. Hindu scriptures describe wars in flying machines and cities turned to glass. Could Derinkuyu be a kind of ancient fallout shelter? A survival chamber built not by primitive people, but by a civilization aware of planetary cycles of destruction? There's even speculation about pre-Ice Age civilizations, lost cultures that built these cities as refugees against a coming deluge or impact event. In that case, the people we think of as builders may have simply rediscovered and reused what was already there. And here's something even more fascinating. The stone doors, massive, perfectly circular slabs weighing over 1,000 pounds, were installed in such a way that a single person could roll them closed from the inside, but they couldn't be opened from outside. That implies a deep understanding of leverage, mechanics, and most importantly, a need for tight security. Security against what? There are no records, no names, no carvings. It's as if these cities were meant to be erased from history, hidden, forgotten, until someone knocked down a wall and found a tunnel. Today, visitors can explore a small portion of Derinkuyu, but most of it remains closed. The deeper levels are too dangerous. Some say unstable, others say sealed on purpose. Could there still be technology buried in those lower levels? Ancient scripts? Forbidden knowledge? We may never know. But the fact remains. An ancient people carved entire civilizations under the earth, and did it with technology, knowledge, and purpose that doesn't match the story we're told. And when you walk through those tunnels, you feel it. This wasn't a panic move. It was a plan. The Nan Madol Enigma, Pacific megastructures and the forgotten builders of the sea. Off the coast of the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia sits a ruined city unlike anything else on Earth. Its name is Nan Madol, and it is known as the Venice of the Pacific. But this is no mere village. Nan Madol is made up of nearly 100 artificial islets, connected by a maze of canals and waterways, all constructed using massive basalt columns, some weighing up to 50 tons. That's right. Ton after ton of hexagonal volcanic stone, perfectly cut, stacked, and aligned, was transported from who knows where, across the ocean, and built into walls up to 25 feet high, rising directly from the sea. It stretches across 200 acres, with no cement, no steel, and no known tools used in its construction. To this day, no one knows exactly how it was built, or by whom, or, perhaps most hauntingly, why. Let's break it down. First, the logistics. These basalt logs are not native to the site. That means they had to be quarried miles away, transported, somehow, to the coastline, and then floated or carried across open water to their final resting place. That alone is a marvel. But then the stones had to be lifted, rotated, and placed with such precision that many of them interlock without mortar, forming staggered, earthquake-resistant walls that have withstood the battering sea for centuries, possibly millennia. Now, here's where the mystery deepens. Nan Madol has no known origin story in mainstream history. Local oral traditions claim it was built by giants, twin sorcerers who flew the stones through the air using magic. According to the legends, they came from a faraway land, settled on Pohnpei, and summoned the city from the sea with unknown forces. And while most dismiss these tales as myth, there's a strange consistency in global traditions of ancient gods or demigods arriving from the sea, building with massive stone, and disappearing. The official archaeological explanation? The site was built around 1200 CE by the Sodalur dynasty. But that doesn't add up. There is no record of tools used, no written plans, no cranes, no ramps, no remnants of a workforce large enough to move thousands of multi-ton stones. And here's the eerie part. There is no evidence of human life on Nan Madol itself, no signs of long-term habitation, no burial sites on most of the islets, no cooking pits. The city was clearly built for something, but what? Some believe Nan Madol was a ritual site, a place of immense spiritual power, built to align with celestial patterns or undersea magnetic anomalies. Others think it was a military fortress, built to control the region, yet its isolation and exposure make that unlikely. And then there's a third theory. A radical one? What if Nan Madol wasn't built by the Sodalur at all, but inherited by them? What if the structure predates them by thousands of years, and the dynasty simply settled there, unaware of its true origins? Here's where it gets strange. The island of Pohnpei is surrounded by what some geologists call anomalous underwater formations, massive stone ridges and sunken structures that appear man-made, stretching across the seafloor. Sonar scans show symmetrical patterns, straight lines, geometric corners, beneath the waves. Could Nan Madol be just the tip of something bigger? Some researchers believe it may be the remains of a lost civilization, sunken beneath rising seas during the end of the last ice age. Think about it. 12,000 years ago, sea levels were hundreds of feet lower. Entire continents of land were above water, now buried beneath the ocean. Could Nan Madol be a surviving outpost of a culture that once spanned the Pacific? A kind of Atlantean node left behind after a planetary catastrophe? Even stranger, some believe the architecture itself holds hidden frequencies. The placement of the basalt columns, some say, suggests an ancient understanding of acoustic engineering. Certain sections of the ruins produce strange echoes, as if the stones were meant to channel sound. In ancient times, sound was more than just noise. It was power. Sound healed. Sound destroyed. Sound moved matter. Could Nan Madol have been a resonant machine? A spiritual sound chamber? A place where the voice, aligned with the stars, did something more? Then there's the magnetism. Modern compasses often go haywire near Nan Madol. Locals speak of strange lights seen over the ruins, glowing orbs, silent flashes, disturbances in the sky. Some refuse to go near the area, calling it cursed or protected by ancient spirits. Even during colonial times, explorers reported feeling disoriented and watched when walking through the ruins. Something about the place feels different, charged, like it's waiting for something, or remembering something, and it all circles back to one question. What knowledge did they have about stone, energy, frequency, and the earth itself that we've lost? Because when you look at Nan Madol, not just at the stones but at what it represents, it tells a story not of isolated islanders, but of engineers, mystics, survivors of a world-changing event. Building in secret, building to last, and building something that may have once connected the stars, the sea, and the soul of ancient man. And if that's true, what else lies beneath the waves? The prehistoric core of Peru, unknown builders of the Andes. In the shadow of Machu Picchu, deeper than the myths of the Inca, lie the true enigmas of ancient Peru. And it begins with one simple observation. Some of the oldest structures in the Andes are the most advanced. That's backwards. You'd expect architecture to get more sophisticated with time, primitive huts becoming temples, temples evolving into cities, but not in Peru. Here, we see the opposite. At sites like Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and Coricancha, the older the stonework, the more precise, the more massive, the more impossible it seems. Let's take Sacsayhuaman, just outside the city of Cusco. Its walls are made of gigantic polygonal stones, some weighing up to 120 tons. These stones aren't rectangular, they're complex multi-angled shapes, each one custom fit into the next with such tight precision that a piece of paper can't fit between them. And they weren't just stacked, they were locked together in such a way that the wall resists earthquakes, even major ones that destroy modern concrete buildings nearby. The stones absorb and distribute shock through their interlocking angles. But here's the kicker. These walls were built without mortar, without iron tools, without wheels. So how? The official story is that the Inca built these sites, and yet, Inca stonework looks completely different. Their constructions, though impressive, use smaller, uniform bricks laid in straight lines with mortar. It's what you'd expect from a powerful Bronze Age empire. But the megalithic core, the mind-bending, immovable stone puzzles, they were already there. The Inca themselves said so. They claimed these places were built by the Viracocha, mysterious beings said to have come from the stars or from before the flood, bringing knowledge and tools beyond imagination. At Ollantaytambo, high in the Sacred Valley, stones the size of buses were transported uphill, across a river, over several miles of rugged terrain. Somehow, they were lifted and stacked with perfect alignment. Even today, with all our cranes, trucks, and laser levels, replicating this would be an enormous challenge. So, what did they use? Some researchers believe these unknown builders had access to lost technologies, things that could soften stone or cut with light or use vibrational frequencies to manipulate matter. There are local legends, whispered through generations, of plants that could melt rock, of whistling sounds that lifted boulders, of flutes and chanting that made heavy objects levitate. Is this metaphor or memory? Could ancient Peru have been home to a technological culture, one that didn't rely on electricity or combustion, but on natural energies we no longer understand? Now step into Coricancha, the Inca's most sacred temple, once sheathed in gold, dedicated to the sun. Beneath its surviving ruins are walls so precisely carved, so mathematically aligned, that they appear almost machine-made. These foundational stones are older than the Inca, forming a core the Inca later built upon. But what was here before? And why do similar techniques show up at places thousands of miles apart? The answer may lie in Tiahuanaco, near Lake Titicaca. Once believed to be just 1,500 years old, new evidence suggests Tiahuanaco may date back over 12,000 years. That would place it around the time of the Younger Dryas, an era marked by climate chaos, sudden sea level rise, and according to some, a civilizational reset. At the nearby site of Pumapunku, stones weighing 100 tons are not just huge, they're precision drilled. They contain perfect grooves, 90-degree cuts, and bored holes that resemble modern machining. Who was doing this in an era where there should have been only hunter-gatherers? The more you look, the more the story fractures. These weren't just sacred temples, they were something more. Some believe the Andes were a global power center, a place where Earth's energy lines or ley lines converge, a place where stone and sky spoke to each other. The positioning of temples, the geometry of walls, the alignments with solstices and star systems, none of it was random. Could these have been energy centers? Gateways of some kind? Atlantean outposts repurposed by later cultures? And why does Peru contain not just monumental architecture, but also carvings of what look like spaceships, humanoids in helmets, and beings with elongated skulls? Are these artistic flourishes? Or inherited memories? Buried beneath the highlands and jungles of Peru, there may be artifacts yet to be found, technologies lost to time, wiped clean by floods, earthquakes, and fire. But once, perhaps, used to build things modern engineers still can't explain. The Andean stones don't just whisper, they resist explanation, because they weren't made by trial and error. They were made by design, with knowledge we no longer possess. The hidden gears of the past, evidence of ancient high technology. We're just starting to understand. Imagine this. The year is 2035. A team of researchers using LiDAR scanners and deep penetration radar discovers strange anomalies beneath a desert in Central Asia. Perfect circles, geometric chambers, long, winding tunnels carved deep into bedrock with no obvious signs of tools. They send in a drone, and it finds what looks like a chamber of gears. Metal, petrified, but unmistakably manufactured. It hasn't happened. Yet. But discoveries like this are already beginning to emerge in whispers, in classified reports, in reluctant museum vaults. Because while most of the world believes our story began with the Sumerians, some researchers are beginning to suspect we've just scratched the surface. Take the case of mystery metal alloys found embedded in coal seams, coal that formed over 300 million years ago. Or the aluminum wedge of Aiud, found in Romania in the 1970s, which was discovered buried next to mastodon bones and dated at over 10,000 years old, made of an aluminum alloy that shouldn't have existed before the Industrial Age. Or consider the perfectly drilled cores found in Egypt, circular holes that spiral in ways that match modern diamond-tipped drill bits, except they were found at sites thousands of years old. Chris Dunn, a manufacturing engineer, examined these artifacts and concluded that only high-speed rotary drills could have left such marks. Then there's Mohenjo-Daro, the ancient city in modern-day Pakistan. A perfectly laid-out urban center with running water, sewage systems, even what some believe were public baths or energy distribution hubs. But the most controversial theory? That it ended in a sudden burst of heat so intense that some of the stones appear to have been fused into glass, like they were hit with a nuclear explosion. Mainstream archaeologists scoff at this idea, but that doesn't explain the radioactive skeletons found in the region, or the vitrified forts in Scotland, stone walls that appear to have been melted, not collapsed, melted. Now, where else have we seen signs of such heat? How about the ziggurat of Dur-Kurigalzu in Iraq? Or the mysterious sites in the Gobi Desert? Scorched ground, blackened stone, walls turned to glass. We're taught that fire, bronze, and iron were the peak of ancient capability. But then explain the precision-lathed stone tubes found in Peru, or the black basalt sarcophagus in Egypt, sealed so perfectly that it took modern equipment to open it, or the crystal skulls found from Central America to Tibet, so intricately carved against the grain of quartz that, according to some experts, not even modern laser technology could reproduce the results without shattering the stone. Coincidence? Artifact contamination? Hoaxes? Maybe. But if even one of these anomalies is real, then history isn't just wrong. It's been reset. There's a theory called the Technolithic civilization hypothesis, the idea that long before Sumer or Egypt, a human civilization, or perhaps something else, achieved a form of non-digital, non-electric high technology. Think sound-based machines, gravity manipulation, energy resonance, material transmutation, not wires, not screens, but natural technology, a system of knowledge more aligned with Earth's frequencies, magnetism, and geometry. A tech that built with stone and frequency, not steel and code. And when you begin to piece together the global puzzle, sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Nan Madol in Micronesia, Pumapunku in Bolivia, the underwater ruins off Japan, Yonaguni, and more, a chilling pattern emerges. Every culture remembers a flood. Every culture remembers sky beings or gods bringing knowledge. Every culture remembers fire from the sky. Every culture builds with stone, aligned with stars. This isn't random. It's a fingerprint, a footprint, a memory, not of gods, but of the last humans, the ones who reached heights we still can't comprehend, and fell, hard. Some say the fall came from war, others say it came from cosmic impact, solar flares, or a planetary shift. Whatever it was, it wiped them out, but not completely, because the clues are still here, scattered across deserts, buried beneath the sea, carved into mountains, not just to warn us, but maybe to help us remember, and maybe, just maybe. That's what we're doing now, waking up, because every time we uncover another anomaly, another perfectly cut stone, another inexplicable artifact, another myth that seems too detailed to be fiction, we're not just looking at the past, we're staring into a mirror. The frequency architects, lost sound technologies of the ancients. Imagine a world where construction wasn't powered by cranes, pulleys, or brute force, but by sound, not music, not chants, but pure, focused vibration, used to manipulate matter, shape stone, even levitate massive objects with ease. It sounds impossible, a fantasy. But the deeper you go into the ancient world, the more signs you find that the builders of megaliths, temples, and sacred chambers weren't just cutting and stacking stone, they were using resonance. Let's start with one of the strangest enigmas in modern times, Coral Castle. Built by a single man, Edward Leeds Calnan, in Florida during the early 20th century, Coral Castle is made of giant blocks of limestone, some weighing over 30 tons. Edward was barely over 100 pounds. He had no heavy machinery, no team, no help. And yet, he constructed an entire complex, walls, gates, furniture, towers, with stones too massive for even modern forklifts to move alone. When asked how he did it, he replied cryptically, "I know the secrets of the people who built the pyramids." He worked only at night, alone. Neighbors swore they heard strange humming and saw blocks floating. Scoff if you want, but no one has ever explained how he did it. Now let's step further back in time. In Peru, at the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, the stones are not just massive, they are melted into shape. Gigantic boulders with edges that interlock like 3D puzzle pieces. No mortar, no gaps, just sheer perfection. How were they shaped? Some archaeologists suggest pounding stones and copper tools. But locals tell a different story, that the stones were softened with a plant and then moved with music. Their legends speak of priests who chanted to the rocks, causing them to rise, float, and glide into place. Absurd? Maybe. But this same theme appears again and again across the world. In Tibet, explorers in the early 20th century reported witnessing monks using long horns and chanting in coordination, causing stones to rise from the valley floor up onto a cliff. And in ancient Egypt, temple walls and hieroglyphs depict the use of tuning forks and rods in ritual spaces. Tools not for war, but for resonance. Even the chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza exhibit acoustic perfection. The king's chamber, especially, is tuned to a specific frequency. Clap your hands, hum a tone, and the walls sing back. Why would they design chambers this way? What if the purpose wasn't burial, but frequency manipulation? Even today, sound is used in cutting-edge tech. Acoustic levitation is real. Scientists have demonstrated how sound waves can suspend small objects in midair. Sonic resonance is used in medicine, in construction, in vibration analysis. It's not fiction, it's physics. Now imagine a civilization that mastered it. They wouldn't need cranes to move 100-ton stones. They wouldn't need tools to carve granite. They'd use frequencies, pure, controlled energy to do the impossible. Some believe the Nazca lines in Peru weren't just visual art, but resonance maps, giant geoglyphs carved into the earth to channel specific frequencies. Others say that Stonehenge wasn't just a calendar, but an acoustic machine, designed to amplify sound in very specific ways, possibly used for ritual, healing, or even altering consciousness. Because that's the other side of this mystery. Sound wasn't just about moving stone, it was about moving the soul. Ancient temples across India, Egypt, and Cambodia are tuned, built to vibrate in response to chants or mantras. Standing in these places, you feel it, a hum, a deep, subtle vibration that seems to reach into your chest and rearrange your thoughts. Was this spiritual architecture or something more? Some researchers believe these civilizations understood cymatics, the science of how sound creates patterns in matter. Sand, water, metal, all shaped by frequency. At high precision, those patterns become structures. So now ask yourself, what if they used cymatics to engineer, to design sacred geometry, complex layouts, and maybe even to encode information into stone? What if temples, pyramids, and altars weren't just symbolic, but functional machines activated by sound? There's one more mystery, the walls of Jericho, one of the earliest recorded collapses of a city, not by war, but by sound. Trumpets, according to the story, brought the walls down. A fable? Perhaps. But today we have acoustic weapons, ultrasound cannons, infrasonic crowd dispersers, resonance machines. Sound can destroy, sound can levitate, sound can heal. And perhaps, sound can build. We've lost the manuals, the tuning forks, the frequencies. But the architecture still sings, waiting for someone to listen. Eyes of the forgotten, ancient optics, and the lost science of vision. Throughout history, we assume ancient people saw the world only through their eyes, unaided, unenhanced, limited to what the human eye can detect. But what if they didn't? What if, hidden among the stones and ruins, are fragments of a technology we barely associate with the ancient world, a technology so precise it could bend light, reveal the stars, and bring the microscopic into view? We're talking about lenses, optical devices, and not crude ones, but ones so advanced they challenge everything we believe about ancient science. The journey begins in Nineveh, ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest cradles of civilization. In the remains of the palace of Assyrian king Ashurbanipal, archaeologists unearthed a small oval-shaped object. It was clear, convex, polished to a remarkable precision. It became known as the Nimrud lens. Mainstream archaeologists labeled it a decorative piece or perhaps a magnifying glass used by artisans. But some researchers believe this lens is far more than that, because this wasn't a simple polished rock. Its curvature suggests it was designed deliberately for magnification. Why is that significant? Because the Nimrud lens is over 3,000 years old, and yet it behaves like an optical tool from the Renaissance. But it doesn't stop there. Let's travel west to ancient Egypt, where the eyes of statues are often made of rock crystal, polished and shaped in a way that they seem to glow. Was this purely artistic, or was it a forgotten memory of functional optics? In one burial site, archaeologists discovered a crystal lens embedded in a necklace, not ornamental, but curved precisely enough to function as a miniature spyglass. Even more astonishing, in Crete, a site dating back to the Minoan civilization yielded a lens made of quartz that could magnify up to 7 times. That's handheld magnification in the Bronze Age. But let's zoom out. What does this all mean? If the ancients had the ability to craft lenses, they weren't just enhancing their sight. They were possibly observing the stars, the planets, maybe even the microscopic world. And this leads us to one of the strangest questions of all. Did ancient people have telescopes? There are accounts from Babylonian and Sumerian tablets that describe the planets in ways difficult to explain without some form of optical aid. Descriptions of Saturn's rings, of Jupiter's stripes, of moons not visible without magnification. How did they know? Even in ancient India, the Sanskrit texts reference stars and planetary movements with uncanny detail. These weren't vague observations. They were mathematically precise. Accurate alignments, orbital tracking, lunar eclipses predicted centuries in advance. One theory is that they used lenses embedded into temple architecture, perhaps in observatories that no longer exist, or in ritual spaces now misunderstood. Another theory is even more radical, that some ancient cultures used liquid lenses, containers filled with water, or oils to magnify distant objects. A primitive but effective form of telescope long before Galileo. And if that's true, we have to ask, how far did their knowledge go? Could ancient cultures have understood light refraction, optical focus, mirroring, and even laser-like applications? In Peru, there are legends of the Incas using mirrors to reflect and concentrate sunlight, not just for heat, but for cutting stone. And in China, some ancient tombs contain concave bronze mirrors with inscriptions only visible under specific lighting angles, a kind of primitive holography. Then there's the enigma of the Louvre lens in France, another crystal lens found in an Egyptian tomb, now kept in the Louvre Museum. Polished, symmetrical, perfect curvature. So here we are, at the end of another step through the shadowed halls of forgotten time. We've gazed through ancient lenses, seen the world through eyes that existed long before our textbooks ever admitted they could. And yet, these fragments, the crystals, the glass, the mirrors, they're not just relics. They're warnings. They whisper of civilizations that once saw clearly and then vanished. They remind us of how easily knowledge can be erased, how entire sciences can be buried, how history can be rewritten, not by victors, but by time itself. But if the ancients could see deeper into the world than we believed, what else did they see? What did they find when they stared into the darkness beneath the earth or gazed into the stars above? Because in the next video, we're going deeper. There are ruins untouched by human feet, tombs sealed in mercury, maps older than continents, and machines, not just lost, but sealed away. So join us for the next chapter, where we dive headfirst into the unexplainable, the forbidden, and the technologies that should never have existed. Because the deeper we dig, the louder the past begins to scream. And some truths were never meant to be unearthed.